people sign up. So I think we can just give it another minute or so and then jump right in if that sounds good.
Alexis is on our town board and Julie is our leads our climate smart task force.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming. And we're just coming up on about 5 minutes after 6. So, Nicole, do you think we should get started or give it another minute?
Yeah, I think we can get started now and then as people come in, they can just join. So, yeah, thank you for joining us today, everyone. This is I think going to be a very informative and fun webinar. And my name is Nicole Ortiz. I'm a member of the Town of Rochester's ECC, and I'm also part of our Climate Smart Communities Task Force. I'm also a volunteer with UCRA, and I've worked with Angelina before, so I know she's a wealth of information on this, and I know she has a really jam-packed presentation for us that'll be really fun about all things composting and how to reduce emissions and build better soils. So I'm just gonna let Angelina take it from here.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Nicole. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our virtual classroom for climate smart composting. At this time, I wanted to invite anyone to use the chat feature in Zoom to briefly introduce yourself in the chat. You can share your name, where you're tuning in from, and any environmental affiliation or municipal affiliation you have in your professional life. And that's totally optional, but it also helps me get to know you and is a kind of nice way of keeping the workshop a little um, interactive and more like a community space together. And I guess I will start us off there. My name is Angelina Brandt. I'm the Director of Sustainability here at the Ulster County Resource Recovery Agency, or UCRA. I'm tuning in tonight from our main office, which is located in Kingston on Flatbush Road. And just to share a little bit more about myself, my composting journey began as a college student at SUNY Cobleskill, where I studied waste management under Dr. Rink, who's the author of the On the Farm Composting Manual and was a former editor of the magazine Biocycle. And as a student, I created an award-winning college vermicomposting capstone project before moving on to become a compost operations intern after college for a local service called Community Compost Company. And after college, I quickly became a compost advocate, joining the United States Composting Council, first as an emerging professional, and now I have the great professional privilege of mentoring other young professionals in the composting industry. I've also been a member of the New York State Association of Reduction, Reuse, and Recycling for about 10 years. And I volunteer on the New York State Organics Council, on their composting conference planning committee, and just have had a really wonderful career um, in this space. I spent the first few years of my career as a recycling and composting educator, working to advance community scale composting and recycling education in Schenectady County before moving back home to my home ground here in Ulster County, where I've worked for UCRA for the past 7 years, leading their recycling outreach team efforts. So composting is super near and dear to me, both professionally and personally. It is really one of my greatest joys to get to help others compost with confidence. And as I shared, my background really spans a lot of different types of composting, from institutional settings to community scale settings to backyard composting, all the way up to the industrial scale composting that we do right here in Kingston. So I'm glad to connect with you and be a resource for you. And I want to thank Climate Smart Rochester for co-facilitating this class with me and making this class possible. Over the next hour, we're going to be discussing the benefits of community scale composting and 4 strategic pathways that towns and other community groups can lead to enhance composting in their community with some practical infrastructure. We'll start with a quick introduction about UCRRA before moving into the core content of the class. And throughout the presentation, just to keep us on track, I do have so much planned for you. We'll take questions at the end, but feel free to share your questions using the chat feature in Zoom. And we'll be looking at those at the end of the presentation. Really looking forward to having a robust Q&A with you. And without further ado, I'll jump right in. Starting with the intro to UCRA, the UCRRA is a public benefit corporation and a solid waste public authority. We are proudly serving Ulster County with our mission, which is to protect public health and the environment by managing Ulster County's waste with the focus on resource conservation. And UCRA was created in 1986, so we're celebrating our organization's 40th anniversary this year, which is really exciting. So UCRRA supports Ulster County with essential public services of designing, implementing, and financing a comprehensive waste management program. And so our agency is responsible for the final disposal of all municipal solid waste, or MSW, that's generated in Ulster County, as well as managing other types of composting and recycling services. Per a local law, all of the municipal solid waste collected at the curb from residents, businesses, schools, and institutions must be directed to one of our 2 facilities, where we then consolidate the waste into larger trucks and export it out to a sanitary landfill. So you can see some photos in the top row here of those waste management practices. With a population of about 180,000 residents, we generate about 100,000 tons of municipal solid waste each year. So for context, 100,000 tons, about 200 million pounds of trash. And as these wastes flow into our care, this waste is live loaded again onto tractor trailers. It's exported out to a sanitary landfill, and we move garbage about 35 tons at a time. That's the maximum amount that can legally fit on a tractor trailer. And so we ship out between 12 and 15 of these tractor trailers every day, 6 days a week that we're open. And each of those trucks travels about 500 miles round trip to go to and back from the landfill. So that kind of gives us a clue about the environmental impact of waste. Even before it ever makes it to the landfill, waste travels really, really far distances, and that consumes a great deal of diesel fuel and resources to do that. And long hauling waste to distant landfills is becoming increasingly expensive. uncertain. So a huge function of our organization is to look to the future, to alternative strategies, promote recycling and waste reduction, and provide services that can help lower our waste footprint as a community. So as the solid waste planning unit in Ulster County, our long-term solid waste management plan commits us to several actions, these guiding principles here on the screen. We are committed to excel at environmental compliance, optimize our ability to divert waste, build sustainable community systems for composting, foster outreach and education, and so much more. I invite you to visit our website to learn more about our organization, all the programs that we offer. One service I did want to spotlight is our recycling outreach team, which is the educational arm of the agency. Our team of environmental outreach professionals support local businesses, residents, schools, landlords, festival organizers, and your municipality with our technical expertise and free consultation services to help you enhance waste sustainability through services like free classes, facility tours, youth programs, outreach events. We have a recycling hotline that's available weekdays from 7:30 to 3:30. You can give us a call at 336-3336 and get some expert guidance on the waste that you have, or answers to your most commonly asked questions are right at your fingertips 24/7 with our AI chatbot feature on our website, or our A to Z Recyclopedia that lists recycling guidelines for over 150 objects. So we really do our part to try to get residents the information they need to make better choices about waste reduction. And we're very proud to be your local subject matter experts on all things zero waste. And if you'd like to grow your knowledge in these areas, citizens can volunteer with us and become a resource to their community through our Master Composter, Master Recycler program. So shout out to Nicole for joining us in that cause and being such a huge asset to your community. Our Master Composter training is offered over 10 classes in June, and you can learn a little bit more about that in the Q&A or by visiting our website. But tonight, our focus is about food waste. So let's face some food waste facts and talk a little bit about composting. 40% of the food that's grown in America is never eaten. That's 19% of US cropland, 18% of US fertilizer use, and 21% of our freshwater supply is used to grow this food that never even gets eaten. And food waste is expensive. It's estimated to be $161 billion per year global impact. And food loss occurs for many different reasons. Food gets wasted before it even leaves the farm. There's about 3 million tons of food that goes unharvested each year because it doesn't meet the quality, the size, or the cosmetic standards, or farmers don't have staffing to glean those crops. And then our transportation system is inefficient. The average American meal travels 1,500 miles before reaching your dinner plate. And so this leads to spoilage from improper refrigeration, damage during shipping, or other reasons. And restaurant wastes food by oversizing their portions, over purchasing ingredients. Grocery stores overstock their displays, they reject shipments for mislabeling, and they trash imperfect produce that's perfectly safe to eat. So at the home level, food waste represents about 20 pounds per person per month, and 90% of people throw away food before it's even spoiled. So at home, we tend to impulse buy, not plan our meals. We don't make shopping lists, right? We throw food out because maybe we're confused about the best buy, use by labels. We don't eat our leftovers, right? There's all of these different contributing factors to why we waste so much food. In fact, the average family in America could save $1,500 per year just by eating more of the perfectly edible food in their kitchen. And this is all while 1 in 8 Americans face food insecurity. So we have a huge opportunity to make a difference with food sustainability. And it starts with even the smallest practices like making a shopping list. So check out our free guidebook on our website for our food storage cheat sheet, learn how to interpret food labels, and so much more. So in New York State, the total waste stream is estimated to be about 42 million tons. And that represents all different kinds of wastes from household garbage, garbage from businesses and schools, but then also bulky waste like construction and demolition debris and um, biosolids from wastewater treatment and all kinds of stuff. But the portion of our waste stream that is typical household garbage or garbage from businesses and schools is about 17.9 million tons. And the chart on the left shows us what's the composition of our municipal solid waste here in New York State. And as you can see, paper is the largest category at 32%, followed by food scraps, which is about 17% of what we're throwing away. Some other big categories here, but just to showcase how, we can really understand from this chart that potentially half of what we're throwing away could be recovered through composting. And so I get really energized at that opportunity, even though it's shocking that so much of that is going to waste. And then the chart on the right is showing us what happens to all this waste in New York State. So you can see 39% is landfilled. 15% is combusted in incinerators. 27% is exported out of New York State, so it travels even further to reach its final resting grounds. And then we have a recycling rate of about 19%. So, how does that compare to national standards? Well, the national recycling rate's about 23%, which is a little surprising that New York is a little bit less than the average. But for our purposes, again, showing you these charts provided by New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, just to hone in the opportunity that so much of what we throw away could be recovered through composting. But let's talk about what happens when waste gets landfilled, because that is the primary strategy that we have in Ulster County. So, a landfill is an environmental facility that's engineered for the systematic burial of waste. And there are regulations governing how these sites are constructed and managed, and that's changed and improved significantly over the past few decades. In New York State, we have about 25 active landfills, and at the end of 2020, these facilities had about 202 million tons of capacity remaining. What does that mean? Well, that equates to about 22 years of capacity for all of New York State. So we are facing a pretty serious landfill capacity crisis in New York State, which is a really great motivator for communities to invest in recycling and reuse and zero waste strategies. So now we know that organic materials make up about half of the weight of all the municipal solid waste that's going into these landfills. And because organic materials like food scraps and paper are more biodegradable, as they slowly break down and decompose over time, they're going to release greenhouse gases. And so that's a predominant mix of mostly methane and a little bit of carbon dioxide. Um, so today, modern landfills are designed to contain waste to as small of an area as possible while preventing a lot of environmental hazards. And it's really amazing how they can succeed at that. Modern landfills also actively collect this methane gas and they either burn it in flares to reduce it to a less harmful greenhouse gas, or it's utilized in landfill gas to energy projects. In fact, the landfill that we use, where our waste goes in Ulster County, generates enough electricity to power 11,000 homes in its host community, which is really amazing. But society understands climate science using the greenhouse effect. So I'm sure most of you are very familiar with what that is. There are many different gases that contribute to the greenhouse effect, but when it comes to waste, again, that's predominantly methane. And there's a lot of debate about comparing the global warming potential of methane to carbon dioxide. But according to the International Panel on Climate Change, Methane is believed to be 20 to 60 times more potent as a greenhouse gas, meaning it is more efficient at trapping heat in Earth's upper atmosphere. So we can look at that on a 100-year horizon or a 20-year horizon, whichever way you look at it. Methane is much more harmful than CO2, though we tend to hear more about carbon dioxide when we are talking about climate change. And when we're talking about climate change, waste management or materials management might not be front of mind, but the waste sector is responsible for about 12% of New York State's greenhouse gas emissions inventory, right behind buildings, transportation, and very close to our electricity use impact as well. So the waste sector includes emissions from landfills, but also waste combustion and wastewater management. And these emissions represent, again, the very long-term decay of organic materials in our landfills that will continue to emit methane at significant rates for more than 30 years. So even though our waste is biodegradable, it's not going to decay very quickly. And this is a very slow, long process of pollution. So, what hope do we have on the horizon? Well, in 2019, New York State passed the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, or the CLCPA, and had some of the most ambitious climate requirements in the country. Among other things, the CLCPA directs the Department of Environmental Conservation to establish greenhouse gas emissions limits, requiring a 40% reduction in statewide greenhouse gas emissions from 1990 levels by 2030, and an 85% reduction by 2050. It's also worth noting that the New York State DEC recently published its long-term solid waste management plan for this whole state and set a vision of an 85% reduction in landfilling waste by 2050. So again, that makes me feel very energized about the direction that the state's going in. And with 17% of our waste stream coming from food waste, the sustainable management of food plays a huge role in climate change. You can learn more about some of these solutions in Project Drawdown, which is a climate mitigation project by Paul Hawken. They compiled leading scholars, scientists, policymakers, researchers, business leaders, and activists to measure and model 100 solutions to reverse climate change. And I wanted to highlight for you that the number 3 thing on their list was reducing food waste. But here you can see there's about a dozen different strategies that all come back to waste management, or again, materials management. So let's dive in a little bit more about composting, and sometimes a definition helps. So composting is the natural process where organic materials like plants and food scraps are mixed together so they break down in a controlled way, resulting in a soil-like material called compost. And composting is high temperature, it's aerobic, it's a microbiological process, and it's aided by a complex food web of soil microbes like bacteria, fungi, actinomycetes, micro and macro invertebrates. And making compost involves browns, greens, water, and air. And while this seminar is not necessarily a how-to compost workshop, we're not going to get into a lot of detail about how to make compost, but just wanted to give a definition and share that, managing compost with the correct proportions of those 4 elements, browns, greens, water, and air, is what makes composting really successful. And material can decay very rapidly. And with, oxygen instead of in a landfill, it does not create methane. It creates a recycled product called compost, which is the most stable form of carbon and a lot of recycled nutrients from that plant matter. And composting sometimes gets confused with the phrase food scraps. So food scraps refers to the inedible parts of uneaten or leftover food residuals, meaning veggies and fruits and breads and grains and coffee grounds and eggshells and things like that. Either before the food is consumed or after the meal is consumed. So food scraps are not compost, and compost is not food scraps. So a little vocab there. So where food scraps are the inputs, compost is the output of the composting process. And compost is dark, crumbly, earth smelling. It is a stable and soil like material that contains organic matter and beneficial soil microbes. And compost is often described as a soil amendment. And again, compost is not the same thing as soil, and it's also not a fertilizer. Soil is a naturally occurring mixture of mineral components produced from weathered parent material that's been broken down over a very, very long period of time. And the exact composition of our soil changes from location to location. Beyond things like stones and gravel and rock debris, most of the mineral particles are a combination of sand, silt, and clay that gives soil its unique texture. And so we're constantly losing soil health to erosion, to pollution, to animals, to all kinds of factors. And so composting emerges as a really wonderful strategy to help rebuild and strengthen soil health. It takes about 500 years for Earth to naturally create 1 inch of topsoil, but we can make compost in as little as 60 days. So that's some food for thought, pun intended. So maybe it's coming clear what the benefits of composting are, but just to drive that home, composting reduces the waste that is burdening our landfills. And composting directly lowers our carbon footprint by removing the most polluting element of the waste stream. And instead of contributing to pollution, food waste doesn't have to be a perpetrator of climate change. It can be a tool for our community's resilience and an asset that can be recycled in a very closed loop neighborhood level system. And composting directly lowers public costs for waste management disposal. At our facility at UCRA, for example, we charge $20 per ton for food scraps or $150 per ton for mixed garbage. So the savings to local towns is very real and very measurable. And then lastly, composting builds citizenship in our community. And it's a very positive social norm that centers environmental protection and planetary health and waste reduction. And again, some of these benefits may be pretty apparent from some of what I've shared, but it helps to put it into perspective. Once we have composted and we have finished compost and we use that in the garden, there are all these wonderful horticultural benefits. So finished compost is high in organic matter, and that helps hold on to nutrients in the soil like a magnet. So nutrients aren't going to be washed away and eroded as easily. And as a result, we don't need to use as much chemical fertilizer. Finished compost, because of its tilth and its coarseness, helps improve the physical structure of soil. So that's what we mean when we call it a soil amendment. Like we're not really adding a lot of fertilizer, but we're changing the physical structure and the pore spaces for water and air, which creates a healthier plant root environment underground. And for insects as well. And compost boosts our soil biodiversity by introducing all these beneficial microbes. And the stronger our soil systems are, they have a better immune system to suppress things like plant diseases and pathogens and pests. And in theory, that also reduces the need to use a lot of chemical pesticides. There are just so many benefits. I'll let you kind of indulge in the last few here, but there's so many wonderful reasons why composting is just a great strategy for any community. So a comprehensive strategy typically combines multiple approaches rather than relying on one single solution. Diversifying your options makes this whole overall system a lot more resilient And so, if possible, communities should really support not just one single version of composting, but many different versions of composting, seeing the value and like the multiplication of all of those benefits when more than one strategy is combined. So, we are going to try to explore four of these options in the class tonight and see some examples of how other towns have implemented these. And we'll look at some simple actions that your town can take, why you would take them, and again, highlight some examples. Starting with backyard composting. So this is one of the best, easiest strategies to do is just promote the concept that people can compost themselves in their own backyard, either through the use of bins or tumblers or worms, or even just an open compost pile. So some actions that towns can take towards this strategy is celebrating and promoting International Compost Awareness Week. So iCow is the compost industry's largest, most far-reaching education and awareness campaign that's celebrated during the first full week of May. And the mission is simple but powerful: bring people together and share the benefits of composting and using compost to build soil health. From a poster contest to a new theme every year to thousands of events all over the world, iCow inspires action at every level. And in 2024, our Ulster County Executive Jen Metzger declared the first full week of May as Compost Awareness Week. You can also Google the phrase New York Compost Awareness Week, and that will get you right to NYSAR's website, where you can learn more about local events and other initiatives. So, towns can work to enhance local composting literacy through celebrating iCow, also through classes, creating brochures, social media. Your town might partner with a local agency like Cornell Cooperative Extension, your local garden club, local garden centers, or compost businesses, or the UCRRA. Last year, we partnered with local libraries to host compost-themed book displays. We launched a compost book list. We had all kinds of composting workshops, and we're going to continue that this year. So stay tuned for more. Or perhaps your town might consider launching a compost champion neighborhood program as part of iCow, creating a like town liaison for people to learn and ask backyard composting questions. Each town has a website about their waste and recycling services at their local town transfer station. So, what does your town website say about composting, and are there good resources there? Or maybe you'd promote iCow through things like interviewing a landscaper or interview a garden center that sells compost. Plan a home composting workshop or meetup. The ideas are really limitless here. But importantly, we make the most impact here when we give people the actual tools that they need to get started. So, one thing your town could do towards that is offer a subsidized or a bulk purchase compost bin sale to provide people with the containers that they need for composting. There are many different companies that offer these kinds of services, and they do tend to be pretty low cost. Or maybe you want to plan something that's a little bit more hands-on. So you could host a workshop and build your own compost structures, or maybe get a troop of local teenagers or Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts to help construct a composting system that you then use for public education, for demonstrations, or raffle it off, have a contest, give it as a prize. There's so many different ideas that you could run with here. Or you could even take your show on the road and create a mobile display that you can bring out to community events and things like that. These are just some photos of our compost bin and rain barrel sale at UCRA. Each year we partner with a company to offer reduced pricing on a truckload sale. So you can pre-order compost bins, rain barrels, and other supplies on our website right now and pick it up during our one-day special event celebrating Compost Awareness Week. So keep that in mind. And I wanted to just share some other fun pictures of what composting education can look like. So we have all different kinds of classes that we offer at UCRRA. We have Intro to Composting, Advanced Composting, Bokashi, working with worms, school composting, and so much more. And I also mentioned our Master Composter program, really become an expert there. Again, shout out Nicole. I got a picture of you here at Earth Fair, helping your neighbors compost with confidence. Possibilities are endless. So why is this such a great strategy? Well, it's the lowest cost option for the town. You don't need a lot of staffing or infrastructure. Home composting is really great when people live in rural areas and are very spread out. So you're keeping your food waste as local as possible to you. And there's a diversity of options. There's so many different composting methods out there. So people get to choose the option or the method that really suits their lifestyle or their family. There are a lot of state grants that are available to help offset the costs of composting education and composting bins. I mentioned our master composter program, so we could train an expert for your town. Bin sales, again, are easy to plan, they're effective. And all of these strategies really build long-term behavior change and environmental literacy in your community. So, yeah, backyard composting is probably the number one strategy. Option two is food scrap drop-off programs. So there are many different versions of community composting in this model. Some programs are paired with a community garden where neighbors do the composting together at like a communal public site. And alternatively, some programs are set up for residents to just drop off the food that they've collected, and then someone else does the composting for them. Typically, it's taken off-site and transported to another compost site by a hauler or by a program liaison. Some common candidate sites for food scrap drop-off would be a commercial farm or community garden, a farmer's market, maybe a community center like a firehouse or a town hall, maybe an educational institution, or even a vacant neighborhood lot in your community. There's, again, possibilities are endless, only limited by your imagination here. So, some example actions that the town could take would be to identify some areas where food scrap drop-off programs might make sense. And the town of Rochester transfer station currently offers this service, and they would really love to see this program grow. Any Rochester resident who holds a permit with the town transfer station can use this composting service for no additional fee, but they do charge, however, for yard waste, which has to be ground up and processed differently. The town employees manage a small open windrow pile where the food is turned into compost, and then residents can access that finished compost that they make for free. So that's a great asset that your community already has. And again, even one effort is just trying to help promote that and grow awareness of that. Um, but in some cases, again, you're not always composting at the same site where people are dropping off. So partnering with a local hauler or regional compost processor is great to keep in mind. We do have lists available on our website of all of those options and can consult with you on who the haulers are and what the network is like. But whether you're composting on site or just dropping off food, it's important to be good neighbors when building out community composting infrastructure. I recognize that the risk of odors and animals and birds and vectors, those are real problems that people can be very concerned about. However, it is relatively easy to take the time and prevent those from becoming a problem just with some simple common sense planning. And part of that is implementing some good controls that you have on site. So having a lot of your brown material, your leaves and wood chips for your composting recipe, really understanding how to mix things correctly, how to always cover up food so that there's no food scraps showing on the top of your compost pile. Um, having really good signage that's standardized, that also helps with contamination control and making sure you're only getting the correct things in your stream. And sometimes also implementing like a access policy for how available this drop-off site is can be very strategic with helping you control contamination and help mitigate some of those issues that might arise. So I thought we'd spend some time looking at some examples of local programs that might inspire you. So this is kind of like a speed dating section where you get to meet some composters. So the city of Kingston launched Kingston Organics in July 2023. In partnership with the Hudson Valley Regional Council, support from its Conservation Advisory Council, and its Climate Smart Commission, they worked on a feasibility study that helped guide their strategic plan for a citywide composting program. Uniquely, the city operates its own sanitation district with its own hauling fleet for municipal collection. So the planners saw the potential to save taxpayer money through reduced expenses in hauling and disposal. Phase one of Kingston Organics was a free voluntary food scrap drop off program with 11 easily accessible locations across the city, one site in every ward, located mostly in public parks. These drop off sites, as you can see, are fully enclosed and locked bins, accessible only to the participants who've registered and received their code to their neighborhood station. Participants also received a welcome kit when they registered, and a city employee services the bins once a week, delivering the organics to the UCRRA for composting. By the end of the first year, there were over 300 families representing 802 individuals that were participating. And by the end of 2025, there were over 1,000 individuals, which is about 5% of the city's population. And the city had diverted 78 tons or 154,000 pounds of organics since this program began in 2023. So this is an excellent example. It's a little bit of a unicorn because the city does have all that infrastructure that it can use. But we're really excited to celebrate this because thanks to a Climate Smart Communities grant, Kingston Organics is expanding, and phase two will bring curbside collection directly to city neighborhoods this year. So any city resident who currently receives their trash collection by the city can sign up for a free 5-gallon bucket and get food scraps picked up on their daily trash route. And the Climate Smart Communities grant will allow them to invest in 2 fully electric trash collection trucks, some dedicated staffing, more outreach materials, and all those program bins. So we are glad to be a partner on this and wishing the city all the success in promoting that. I wanted to share about the Saugerties transfer station. Their food scrap drop-off program began in October 2018. They partnered with Community Compost Company for weekly pickups, and any resident in Saugerties or Woodstock can just pay a small annual fee for this service, which is an add-on for their town transfer station permit. Residents receive, again, an instructional guide explaining what's accepted, and then they use their own container to bring their food to the facility. You can see, as pictured here, the site has a fully enclosed and locked 20-foot trailer that can fit about 12 45-gallon rolling tote bins inside. So the company comes and empties and cleans those containers weekly, bringing the food scraps back to their compost site in Ulster County. And at the end of each day, the trailer gets locked, eliminating the threat of any wildlife. And the company uses that collected material to create a specialty compost and topsoil blend that they sell to farmers and growers. So this trailer was really the only thing that the town needed to purchase in order to start this program in this type of model. Um, and according to the company, to date, this program has collected about 38 tons or 76,000 pounds of food scraps since 2018, which again is extremely impressive. A similar program is in place at the town of Shandaken transfer station. In 2023, the Shandaken Conservation Advisory Committee was looking to offer residents with a composting option due to the level of bear activity in this rural part of the county. Many homeowners were not comfortable with home composting. So the task force first surveyed people to learn if they were interested in composting, and they had a lot of enthusiasm. So they investigated different possibilities with haulers and equipment and eventually found a local farmer to pick up the collected food scraps and bring it back to their farm for composting. So in 2023, the town, the highway department, and the CAC jointly applied for a grant where they won $5,000 from the O'Connor Foundation to purchase this Barracuda 3-door steel and bear-proof dumpster that houses the 20-gallon buckets that residents can come and deposit their food scraps in. So I think you're seeing some patterns emerging, right, with how these programs form, how they're fully enclosed stations, they're locked stations. You register to get access to them, you get education on what can go in, and they are just wildly successful. One thing that kept the costs down in this program is the fact that it was a local farmer who wanted to take on that role of supporting the town. And so that also kept their costs very low. And I understand that in their first year, they collected 2.34 tons of food scraps, which is roughly about 2,000 gallons. So very successful. And again, as this program expands, we're just so excited to see it staying local and being volunteer led. And we're celebrating them, wish them the best of luck. I got a couple more to show you. Kingston YMCA Farm Project is a space where children and high school aged students are involved in all aspects of food production, and some are employed at the farm year round. In recent years, one of their empowerment coordinators received a fellowship from the Open Space Institute to pilot a community composting project at the farm. They partnered with Community Compost Company for training and to build the 3-bay composting system that's there at their garden in Kingston. So anyone in the neighborhood is allowed to drop off their food scraps at a central tote bin that's on the farm. There's no charge. And on a weekly basis, the youth farm workers incorporate the food scraps into the system. So they fill a wheelbarrow with wood chips and then gradually incorporate the food into that wheelbarrow and use tools like choppers and pitchforks and shovels to reduce the size of the food scraps, mixing everything together and then emptying it into their bin system, and then covering all of that material up with lots of wood chips, which is another strategy that reduces odors or pests or animals. They don't sell the finished compost, they just use it for their pollinator garden on site. But what a wonderful example of how food sustainability and composting education can be so dynamic and interdisciplinary and hands-on and really community service focused. And there are just so many examples like this. Here's the New Paltz Community Center, which launched a volunteer-led program in 2024. There's no fee to join this program. Local residents use their own container to bring their food to the system. They empty it into the bin. They're responsible for just covering up with a little bit of wood chips. And then the center also has a volunteer crew and 2 SUNY New Paltz interns that come weekly and help service the bins as well. So this is just another great version of that. And a little bit on a larger scale, lastly, I wanted to show you the village of Rhinebeck. So the town and the village of Rhinebeck jointly offer a food scrap drop-off program that was made possible through the support of DEC grants and a contract with a local horse farm, Ellerslie Stables. So sorry if I butchered that. But the program started as a small pilot. The original plan was to construct a municipal composting site to be managed by the village. And they were successful at securing some grant funding to launch that. But unfortunately, they faced some negative feedback from community members who were concerned again about the impact on odors or air quality or noise or traffic. And ultimately, they were not successful at moving forward with that plan. The village had to abandon that plan and that grant money completely. And that's when a local farmer reached out to offer their support for the project for it to move forward. Farmers often have the space, the equipment, and the willingness to become a partner. And so they were allowed to rework their grant with some adjustments and entered into a contract with that horse farmer for the next 7 years, where the farmer procured this truck with the help of the grant and is offering the hauling and composting services for no fee, but the farmer keeps the finished compost that's made through the process. So similarly as what we've heard with these other examples, participants register online. The village actually reaches out with a personal phone call to onboard everyone. Then participants get an email where they take a quick watch a quick video and take a quiz to make sure that they understand the composting do's and don'ts and how the system works. And once they complete the quiz, they get their code to access the locked bins that are located in the municipal parking lot. So this is a wonderful program. The composting site has capacity for about 8 tons of food per week, but I think they're processing closer to like 1 to 2 tons per week right now. So there's lots of room to grow. And I hope this is giving you so many ideas about what's possible. This is a great strategy because there's pretty moderate to low costs in terms of what you need to get set up, some bins, some signage, some handouts, right? And then that decision of hauling off-site or doing the composting yourself. You can capture a wide range of food scraps. Often these programs can include things like meat, bones, and dairy products that people aren't as confident about composting at home. This is really fast to implement relatively, rather than building a full-blown composting operation at the town level. So there's also a higher diversion potential than backyard composting alone. It's not everyone's going to be comfortable with backyard composting. So it's a great program also because you can learn by example. These types of sites are becoming very common across the state. We have over 20 sites like this here in Ulster County, and there's literally hundreds all across the state with all different kinds of models that you could look to. And again, state grants help create some of that funding that lowers the costs where those investments need to be. So we wanted to look at an option for on-site composting. So this would be a town-managed compost operation. In this model, that the town would operate a facility that would handle food scraps and yard waste. Some actions that the town would take to work towards this goal first would be to study the options and develop a plan. Most municipalities tend to do this through a consultant, like a feasibility study and a site selection analysis, but this can also be quite informal, but you need a leader to do that research. Choose a system. There are all different types of large-scale composting systems and technologies available. You'll have to think and plan through a lot of those logistics and develop plans for the end use of all your finished compost. Depending on the amount of food the site would handle, it might need permits with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. So, organics recycling is a regulated activity as part of Part 361 of the New York State regulations. So, facilities can be exempt, registered, or permitted. Exempt facilities pose limited risk for environmental health impacts. And so, therefore, you don't need to inform the department about really small sites that process less than 1,000 pounds or less than 1 cubic yard of food scraps per week. For larger programs, though, facilities do need to apply for either a registration or a permit with the central office. And following permitting, you would then explore grant opportunities to help secure the capital equipment, staffing, advertising, and those types of logistics to really launch the program. A huge asset that we have in New York State is that DEC provides state assistant grants to projects that further composting infrastructure. So there are grants available that offset the costs for the construction of composting facilities, the purchase of equipment and composting containers, new composting vehicles. There's a grant that provides a 50% reimbursement on those types of eligible costs, and the town would put up the costs and get paid back 50% within 2 to 5 years, which is pretty good. But DEC also has a grant program for recycling coordinator services. So to actually hire a compost educator or compost liaison that would maybe do the feasibility study, do the planning, do the site selection, and then also activities around promoting the service through printed guides, billboards, signage, displays, giveaway items, compost bags, compost buckets, you name it. That's also another grant that's a 50% reimbursement. And that grant is a much faster timeline. So for staffing and education, that's an annual grant, which is really wonderful. So again, I wanted to show you some examples. So we're going to speed date with a couple composters here. The Westchester County Compost Ed Facility stands for Compost Education Facility, which is so clever. They opened on Earth Day in 2021 as the first aerated static pile composting demonstration site in Westchester County. Um, to collect food scraps, they've actually partnered with their local food pantries to collect any excess food that's not distributed to people in need. And they typically bring in between 1 and 2 tons of food scraps per week. And the site requires about 30 cubic yards of yard waste and leaves each month. Their system is an extended bay system, so they have 8 different aerated bays, and they mix material from one bay to the other as it ages and matures through the composting process. Last year, they produced about 130 cubic yards of finished compost, which is so excellent. They have a give back program that residents love. In addition to helping food pantries be more sustainable, they use the site to teach college students, school campuses, and residents about composting as well. So this is a really unique site. Erie County has a compost site that was constructed in 2020 at their correctional facility in Alden, New York. The idea of constructing the site came from a thought group, a green team of all different representatives from all different departments that work on green initiatives in Erie County. And they currently collect food scraps almost exclusively from the correctional facility. They also have a holding center, and they also partner with Meals on Wheels. The site processes about 75 cubic yards of food scraps each year. They typically have between 2 or 3 piles this size going at a time. And it's been wildly successful. Again, they were able to secure some of this municipal funding to purchase a front end loader to help turn the piles. They installed some lighting, they needed some bins, but it was a really great program. And their goals for the future are to expand and partner with 5 different towns in Erie County to start collecting food scraps from residents in addition to the institutional waste that they're currently processing. The town of Southold is in County, and their Department of Solid Waste has operated a 10-acre composting site for decades. And it has traditionally only handled yard waste, but it began a small pilot project in 2024 to start accepting food from local residents. There's currently about 120 households participating. And they self-haul food scraps to the site in their own 5-gallon buckets. It's amazing, even the impact of just that. They recycled over 11 tons of food scraps, and so they sell their finished compost as like a leaf mulch made from the yard waste, the manures, and the food scraps collected. So they're currently working on a grant to expand due to the success they've had with the residential pilot. And locally, the town of New Paltz transfer station began its composting program several years ago, again, made possible through state grants. Any resident in New Paltz can drop off their food scraps here as part of their transfer station permits. Residents receive that instructional guide about what's accepted. They use their own container to bring it to the facility, and then the town employees manage the compost pile. And so this is a really great opportunity. I believe that they're very like under processing what their capacity currently is at the site. But residents love it and they love getting the fresh finished compost that their town sells back to them. So this I'd definitely say is a project that the town would have the highest level of control and cost stability over time. Um, Building your own site, you can really dream big and go big. And so you're able to maximize the diversion potential in this manner and also maximize the visibility of the program. It's a nice compliment that the compost that's made through the program becomes a local resource, so you can keep that right in your community, either sell it back to residents or do give back days, or use it municipally for soccer fields, athletic fields, parks, tree plantings, etc. You really reduce your dependence on external partners and, again, things outside of your control. And this can be easily integrated if you have any existing yard waste composting programs. Again, going for those state grants will help make it less expensive, even though this is probably the more expensive option. And there's a lot of great coalition building around composting. So the U.S. Composting Council has a really wonderful operator training course. So you can grow your workforce with skills in composting. And then I've mentioned NYSAR a couple times. The New York State Association for Reduction, Reuse, and Recycling also has immersive conferences and committees and all different kinds of resources available there as well. So we have a huge asset in Ulster County in UCRA's Organics Recovery Facility. So I wanted to just end with our story. We started as a small pilot project back in 2012 and put a plan into action with a engineering consultant called O2 Compost. And when we started, we were allowed to process 500 tons per year of food scraps. We had a grand opening, started to promote the program to local restaurants and to some of the local haulers, and it quickly gained traction. By 2016, we were ready to expand. And so we invested in some additional equipment and went back to DEC and asked for permission to change our permit status to increase to 2,500 tons per year because it became so successful. Over the pandemic, we decided go big or go home as our local composting industry gradually became more mature and there were some local policies mandating composting by large businesses that became enacted. We invested in even more facility improvements and more equipment to further our composting capacity. And so in 2023, we celebrated our 10-year composting anniversary. We launched a new bagged compost line with the support of a grant that we signed onto along with Ulster County and the Climate Smart Communities grant program. And in that same year, we got approval from DEC to again increase our processing capacity to 5,000 tons per year. But we didn't stop there. We are committed to getting the best performance of this facility as possible. That's our commitment to you, to really make investments in organics recycling, make the best quality compost possible, and do our part to inspire others to do the same. So in 2025, we went back to DEC and asked for approval to increase our allowance. Sorry for the typo there, but it should be 7,500 tons per year of source separated organics. So we have a fully mature industrial scale composting operation that's really setting us up for the future. And we believe that we can have really great success in this program. We have composted over 83 million pounds of food since 2012. If that food had to be landfilled instead of composted locally, it would have required over 1,000 tractor trailers to transport it to the landfill, over 500,000 miles away. Cumulatively, that is the equivalent of driving around the surface of the Earth 23 times. So the carbon emissions avoided is equivalent to burning more than 85 million pounds of coal or 10,000 home energy use for a year, or running 23 wind turbines for a year, or the carbon sequestered by 77,000 acres of US forest for a year. So again, these climate impacts are very real and they are very measurable. And for anyone who composts at any level, you are a part of that success with us. We are nearing the end of our presentation. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for Q&A, but the last strategy I wanted to just really briefly introduce is focusing on commercial composting. So very similar to home composting, a very basic thing that the town can do is just encourage local institutions like schools and restaurants and grocery stores to compost or contract with haulers and services that will allow them to do that. So you first have to identify those major institutions and the large food waste generators. That's a little easier to do now that New York State has a mandatory composting law that went into effect in 2022. So they've gone ahead and done some of that work for us to identify those recyclers. Um, Tapping into the existing resources that are available for free technical assistance. So DEC has a contract with the Center for Eco Technology, or CET, and that is called the Rethink Food Waste New York program. So there are environmental science professionals that are available for free waste audits, free consultations with New York businesses and institutions, no matter the size, to help them focus on food sustainability and start composting programs. In fact, the Rethink Food Waste New York program can also help your town and consult with them if they wanted to construct their own compost operation, that last strategy we just highlighted. And again, enhancing community literacy just around education and recognition and awards. Maybe you would partner with your local chamber of commerce or your business district, or partner with UCRA to do outreach events or classes. We would love to work with you on things like that. So this again has very low costs to implement. It's very fast to get going. There's a huge diversion impact because we're focusing on the generators that make the most amount of food waste. And there's a lot of synergy with statewide policies, and again, local resources that are there to help you. So, as we wind down our climate smart composting marathon of all the different composting options, I just wanted to thank you again for sticking with us through this. And if you're new to UCRRA and the work that we do, we have a lot of really wonderful programs going and a lot of great goals for the future. So, I wanted to have this slide here just to show you again what our commitments are to waste reduction, composting, reuse. We've got some new programs in mattress recycling and circular economy strategy that we're looking into. You can learn more on our website or tap in during our Q&A. It's really great to be a resource for you. There's a lot of information out there. If you are energized by tonight's conversation, I invite you to look at the DEC website, check out NISAR. There's some grants available also through the Pollution Prevention Institute. If you want to jot that down, it's their community grant program at P2I, Cornell Waste Management Institute, now soon to be NICOR, the New York Center for Organics Recycling Education, CET, and so much more. So we've taken a bite out of this huge iceberg here, but what I want to share with our community advocates on the call tonight is that we're here with you. We know that some of this stuff feels a little complicated. It's not easy to move mountains, but together it's amazing what we can get done. Um, with that, I'm ready to take a sip of water maybe and open up the Q&A. And I just want to thank again Climate Smart Rochester for your support and your ambition to focus on this topic and organize your community around what's possible. It's great to be on the call with you. I'm also joined by my colleague Eva Barnett, who might help me a little bit with the chat. And it's been a pleasure. Conversation's just beginning. Thank you so much, you guys. It looks like we've had a lot of great activity in the chat. In addition to looking at that, I invite anyone who's comfortable speaking to feel free to open your webcam, open your um, microphone, and we can kind of have a chat. And I might ask for your support, Nicole, or maybe Heather, if you could flag any questions for me, and we can kind of take them from there as we go from the chat.
Yep, I can do that for you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
No problem. So I think
If it's okay, there were some questions at the top of the chat. How do the towns deal with misuse of the drop-off sites?
Great question. So, one of the biggest challenges that drop-off sites face is contamination and people who may have very good intentions, but bringing the wrong items to be composted that might not be accepted or desired by the compost operator that's going to be processing that. So, for example, the town of Saugerties has a one warning policy where, if they are inspecting, well, it's a huge, let me back up, a huge way to prevent that is have a program in place to inspect what people are dropping in. Some of these programs are not monitored, meaning there's not someone standing there at the bin to do that. So that emerges why educational media and the training and the onboarding and the flyers and all of the signage and all that's so important. But for programs that do have a way to monitor it, Town of Saugerties has a one warning policy where first time they see a wooden popsicle stick or a bag of dog poo or something like that, there's a warning and just advising, hey, this is really important to us that we're making high quality compost. Here's the flyer just as a reminder of what can and cannot go in. And we reserve the right to, withdraw anyone from the program if that gets abused. So that rises to the top of my list in terms of like challenges that you might have and how you might go about solving some of those challenges. So again, there's so many ways that you can build in success ahead of time by having really great tools, really clear communications, having a way of educating the people that are signed up and signed in, and then even at a higher level, having like an inspection protocol. Um, Thanks, Eva, for helping me identify that question. And yeah, as my colleague, I'd invite you to build off of that too, Eva, if you have any other thoughts on what you've seen in any of those programs, feel free to chime in.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Well, with the Kingston Organics, for example, I know Julie's pretty proud of the fact that there's been little to no contamination or misuse with the Kingston Organics program, and that is largely due to the welcome packet and the wealth of information that all of the participants that register receive, and really just like clear acceptance lists, basically saying like if it's food, we'll take it, and if it's not food, doesn't go in. And the fact that all registrants get a code to access the drop-off locations prevents any others from opening it up, confusing it for trash, and putting in things that aren't compostable or aren't food scraps. One reason that the program doesn't allow compostable packaging or other kinds of products that aren't food is because those so frequently do get confused with trash. It's very hard for someone to see in a bin that if the fork in there is compostable or not. To a passerby, it just looks like garbage. And once somebody sees garbage, then they just assume that the entire bin is for garbage. So really getting clear on that and ensuring that, there's as little confusion as possible is a way to be set up for success.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for highlighting that and drawing also to the City of Kingston program with as much food as they've collected, it is really quite impressive that they haven't had any contamination issues. They haven't had a single uh, pest or mouse or anything like that at any of their sites that are located in public parks too, which is really impressive.
I think there was another question. Do you know how Socrates received the funding for their program?
Sure. So I mentioned that in Socrates, they charge a compost user fee. So generally, all the town transfer stations will have a permit fee, and then it's a one-time per year fee, and then you use all the other services. So because Socrates is partnered with a private company and they charge them for that service, they felt it was appropriate to charge a small fee for residents using that so that could help fund the ongoing cost of paying the hauler. Um, I don't think that they used any grants in terms of securing that like shipping container that stores their bins. But other than regularly paying their composting bill, that was the only other expense that they had. And it's a small fee, if I recall correctly. I don't want to misspeak, but I remember it being maybe $20 per year or something like that for the Socrates Compost Club.
There was another question. Do you know of a network of backyard composters?
That's a great question. It sounds like my kind of party wherever they are. I'd like to think that our volunteer program helps to satisfy that a little bit by creating a community space for people who really love uh, composting and zero waste and crusading against the plastic crisis and all that. We've built a really great community through that program, but nothing is really jumping out to me in terms of a backyard composter network, not at least not in Ulster County specifically. There's definitely a lot of programs statewide and across the country that are, coalition focused. Like I mentioned, NISAR has an organics council, but that's not necessarily for backyard composters. Or the Institute for Local Self-Reliance might have some committees and that among their membership. That's another great resource if you're looking for something like that.
The Cornell Cooperative Extension has a group of master gardeners, and they're a great resource. I would say maybe not necessarily a network of just backyard composters, but certainly if you go to any of their events,
They're watching.
you'll definitely find
What?
quite a few of backyard composters who know what they're talking about and are very experienced and more than willing to share their experience and knowledge.
Zootopia is not Mama's favorite. Whoops, sorry. Trying to make my kids calm down.
Very good. Okay, I think I'm caught up here with some of the Q&A. It looks like Alexis was curious about the grants that I mentioned, so I'm happy to speak more about that. So there's two big grants that I mentioned at DEC. A shorthand to Google this is MWRR, and it stands for Municipal Waste Reduction and Recycling Grants with DEC. So these grants are open to municipalities, so not private businesses, not non-for-profits. This would be a grant that the town itself would go for. Their capital projects grant provides 50% reimbursement for equipment, facility construction, containers, and similar supplies. The recycling coordinator grant would also cover 50% reimbursement for salary and benefits of a recycling or composting dedicated professional that spends at minimum 50% of their staff time focused on recycling and composting coordination and education. So your question specifically asked about staff that manage the compost site. So as long as there is a component of education, a very strong component of education in that job description, um, and it's not just like an operational role, um, unofficially, I think that does sound like something that would be eligible for reimbursement. So if you go to the almighty Google and you type in New York State DEC MWRR grant, that will get you right to the page. Or we can get that to you if you want to reach out to me after the webinar.
I did put in quite a few links up in in the chat, starting with Rethink Food Waste, and one of them was for DEC, and it was just their grants in general, but you should be able to find the MWRR grant in there.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Eva. Um, we've got another question. I don't want to put you on the spot, Eva, but Nicole was curious about composting at local events, and I know that you have had so much contribution towards that this past year at the agency. Would you be interested in talking about that a little bit?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm really excited about the work that we've done to support event organizers and their efforts to really reduce the amount of waste that's generated at these events. So we did develop a festival guide that outlines a lot of what a lot of these points, not just for capturing food scraps, but also recycling and garbage, and how to organize a team of volunteers, and how to engage other stakeholders to promote the event, to promote it as a green event, and really get people excited about participating, whether they're coming to enjoy the event itself or to be a part of it as a volunteer or a staff member, or just to help, be a local voice to shout from the rooftops that this is a cool thing. And one of the ways that we have been doing that, even before we put out the festival guide, is through our free bin rental system, or program, where we have collapsible bins and signage that goes with them. And anyone can rent them out for free. We give the liners and the bins and a brief consultation to the organizers so that they're set up for success. The organizer is still responsible for managing the final disposal or composting or recycling of those items. But having the bins is a really great starting point to fulfill that effort of just having like the structure, the physical structure there, and the signage, which is really clear, really simple, and just helps all festival goers do the right thing, and reduce as much waste as possible. So we have two different versions of the signs. One is for well, I won't even go into it, but basically, you can be sure to collect food scraps and either work with a farmer that you know who's willing to help out, that may already be composting, or to bring it to work with a professional, a commercial hauler, and they can bring it to a facility like ours, or maybe community compost. There's a whole host of options that Angie shared with us already this evening. But the application process for this bin rental program is really simple. As I said, it's free and open to anybody, and we really encourage we really want to see it, people taking advantage of it as much as possible. I think it's a really great and simple tool that we all have access to. Did I miss anything,
No,
Angie?
that was perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so much for all of that content about the bin rental and the ways that we're really, again, trying to expand some of our services to really meet the needs of the community. And the bin rental program is really exciting. It's really taken off. So keep your eye out, or if you're in Ulster County and have event that you're planning, reach out to us to sign those out for free. Just doing a little check-in on the time. We have time for maybe one or two more questions. I see Allison was thinking about how we can find these kind of community partners, like the example I shared in Dutchess County with a local horse farmer, to get them involved. It's a great question, Allison. It's one that I am thinking about all the time. How do we find these community partners that have the willingness, the know-how, the tools, the connections, to maybe host a site or take on such a huge leadership role? I think in the example in Dutchess County, the farmer saw that clear value of getting to have a finished compost product that they can then sell back as a high quality compost product. So that's like a public-private partnership that is mutually beneficial, right? Because they're providing these services at no cost to the town and the village, and in exchange for their in-kind services, they're, having a beneficial business aspect to it for them. So it's, yeah, I won't sell it short. It's difficult to find those kind of champions, but they're out there. And I think the more visibility and enthusiasm and coalition building that you can do along the way and diversify who you're talking to. If you're trying to start a community program, I encourage you to really diversify your lens of possible partnerships. Some of the sites I mentioned in the beginning as good candidate sites, right? Like a firehouse, a volunteer firehouse is kind of unexpected, but I'm seeing a lot of them pop up in those kinds of ways too. It doesn't have to necessarily be a farming forward program, but it is the civic engagement aspect of it that I think can reach be really far reaching. Yeah, I don't know. Eva, if you have any other thoughts on that, it's a tough question, but and then
Yeah, I don't think I do have anything else to add other than I think it's inspiring that somebody from the community just like recognized the resources that they had and that they could open that up to help out their neighbors and the rest of the town. And they were already composting with manure, so it didn't take much equipment wise or even labor wise, they already had the infrastructure to be doing it. Um, so yeah, I think it's just about really thinking outside the box and approaching people in our community with these ideas and see what comes from various conversations.
yeah, well said. I couldn't agree more. Um, so I want to thank everyone again for such a rich Q&A, and it's really great to hear from you and hear what you guys are thinking about. I hope to stay connected with my Climate Smart Rochester Fellows, and that this is just the beginning of more to come for Rochester. And you're 10 steps ahead, already having a little composting happening in the community. So I'm really energized by that. And there's a lot of ways I think that we can work more together to make that program more visible. And any way that UCRA can help along the way, we're really glad to do so. So thank you guys for being such great partners with us, and more to come.
I'm just going to use one last minute to plug our Master Composter Recycling program, because to answer Allison's question, like how you can emulate this workshop, the best way I can share is to sign up for that program and learn from the master herself, Angie, and you'll get the tools you need to be one of our allies and part of our recycling outreach team.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Eva. I wish you all well on your composting journey. Happy composting, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.